Okay, let's see. Is Mr. Tibbs here? I know he might be late. If Mr. Tibbs is not available, then Mr. Bursai, would you call a meeting to order and then we will take a roll?
Will do. In Brian's absence, we will call this meeting to order. Michael, if you could.
Ricky, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ricky.
Yeah, so can I.
I can hear you, Ricky.
I can hear you, Ricky.
I can hear you, Ricky, also, and I'm glad to hear you.
Okay. I guess the problem audio.
Okay, I think I've fixed my problem here. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we will call this meeting to order, and Michael, if you could do the roll call.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Tibbs. Mr. Tibbs is not present. Mr. Bursai.
Here.
Mr. Bricktop.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Barrick.
Here.
Ms. Doss.
Here.
Mr. Thompson is going to be late today. Mr. Wagster.
Here.
Mr. Heathcote.
I'm here.
And Mr. King.
Here.
Great, thank you. Would like to very quickly acknowledge some guests that we have. We have members of professional society, as well as some members of UTC and ETSU joining us today. Thank you all for being here. And next item, very quickly, before we get to the rulemaking, are there any agenda changes or additions for this?
Michael, this is Blair. I would like to add, under committees, I'd like to add Landscape Architecture Committee.
Okay, that is noted. Thank you, sir. Okay.
And Michael,
Yes.
we need to read the statement of necessity.
We do. Oh, I'm sorry, I got out of order. I was going to do that right now. Statement of necessity will be read by Maria Bush.
Good morning, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners, which is taking place by electronic means, utilizing the WebEx teleconference application on Thursday, April 8th, 2021. Notice of this meeting was properly posted to the board's website. Because there is not a physical form present, a statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of the governing body, and in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting, require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within a period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to discuss regularly scheduled matters of the board and have a rulemaking hearing. The WebEx teleconference application is being utilized in order to provide the most safe manner of meeting due to COVID-19. All voting will be conducted by roll call. And just one thing, Jenny, for our court reporter, the portion of the meeting that we actually just need, the transcript of is going to be the rulemaking hearing. So this is kind of a little bit before, so it's not necessary for you to get all this down. Thank you all.
Thank you, Maria. And let's see, now we can go to approving the February 2021 minutes.
I make a motion to accept those.
Michael, this is Robert Campbell. I second that motion.
All right.
Any discussion? Okay, Michael, you want to take a roll call?
Yes, sir. And I would just say that I believe that was Mr. Brickta who made the motion initially. So let's see. Okay, Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Brickta,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Sorry, yes,
Mr. Thompson. Oh, sorry, Mr. Thompson's still not with us. Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria, would you have, it's now your rulemaking session.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry, I was muted. So Jenny, this is the part where we will need everything taken down. I sent all of you documents for this in advance. There's a red line and let's see the official name, the Regulatory Flexibility Addendum, and the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee. So I'll just be reading from the script for this, so just bear with me here, everyone. Just
Ms.
statutorily,
Bush?
there's things that we have to go through.
Miss, excuse me for interrupting. Your microphone is just a little scratchy. Can I just get you when you're reading to slow down just a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
Jenny.
very much.
Is this better for hearing wise? I had headphones in, so okay, great. Okay, so I'll begin now. This rulemaking hearing is called to order. My name is Maria Bush, and I serve as Associate General Counsel in the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Division of Regulatory Boards, and I represent the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. Would the agency representatives who are present introduce themselves for the record? And so, Michael, can you please introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, my name is Michael Schultz, I'm the Executive Director of the Architects and Engineers Board.
Okay, and then Michael, can you just read off who is here present as far as board members?
As far as board members, we have Mr. Alton Heathcote, Mr. Ben Brickta, Mr. Blair Parker. I'm going line by line. Mr. Frank Wagster, Ms. Melanie Doss, Mr. Ricky Bursai, Mr. Rob Barrick, Mr. Robert Campbell, and I believe Mr. King is on as well, Mr. Steve King.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Michael, this is Rick Thompson. I just joined.
Okay, Rick, we see you there as call-in user number 3. If we can get Dustin to get you a label real quick, that'd be great.
Right, I'm on my phone. For some reason, I can't get on my computer, but that's all right.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Today is Thursday, April 8th, 2021. This rulemaking hearing is taking place pursuant to TCA Section 45204 via WebEx. The purpose of this rulemaking hearing is to solicit comments on proposed rules. This rule amendment outlines what activities constitute progressive experience in the practice of engineering. The Special Committee on Experience Evaluation of the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying has developed guidelines for the work areas and skills an engineer intern must develop to attain progressive engineering experience. Board members utilize these guidelines when evaluating exam applications, with greater weight being given to the practical application of theory component. This list is available to licensees on the board's website and is utilized internally. In order for applicants to be properly notified of acceptable avenues of progressive experience, this rule is being amended to include the specific language denoting what activities qualify. This rule amendment provides definitions for activities including practical application of theory, management of engineering, communication skills, and social implications of engineering. As noted, this amendment will make a rule out of the guidelines for engineer qualifications the board is currently utilizing. A rule is defined as an agency statement of general applicability that implements or prescribes law or policy or describes the procedures or practice requirements of the agency. Proposed rules are filed with the Office of the Secretary of State. Notice is given to the public for comment, and a rulemaking hearing is held. Upon conclusion of the hearing and adoption of the proposed rules, the rules are forwarded to the Attorney General's Office for review of legality. If approved, they are filed with the Secretary of State, which is responsible for publication, and the Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly. The rules must stay in the Secretary of State's office for 90 days, the end of which time will be the effective date. Those members of the public wishing to speak should use the comments bubble on WebEx to inform our meeting coordinator, Dustin Barati. He will call names one at a time. Only those who have informed Dustin that you wish to speak will be permitted to do so. Comments will be accepted from persons who have signed up via the chat function or who have emailed their name in advance. Because this electronic meeting is not our usual method for rulemaking hearings, at the end we will ask if anyone else from the public wishes to speak. That will be the last opportunity for Dustin to unmute you so you can ask a question or provide a comment. The notice of rulemaking hearing included the entire text of proposed rules and was published on the Tennessee Administrative Register website February 8th, 2021. As the agency hears public comments on the proposed rules, I, as moderator, reserve the right to limit such comments if they become repetitive. Please limit your comments accordingly. I will summarize the substance of the proposed rules into the record. So at this time, if you would like to reference the red line that was sent out. So this rule section is 0120-01-.10, education and experience requirements. Engineer is amended by adding the following language so that as amended, section 2 shall read. So this goes on to state what progressive experience is and gives categories. And these are subparagraphs A through D. So A is practical application of theory, which includes 1, analysis, 2, design, 3, testing, 4, implementation, 5, systems application, 6, time in the engineering process, and 7, knowledge and understanding. And each of these have examples given. B is management of engineering, which includes 1, planning, 2, scheduling, 3, budgeting and contracting, 4, supervising, 5, project control, 6, risk assessment. C is communication skills, which includes 1 and 2, which is 1 is accumulation of project knowledge, and 2 regards transmission of project knowledge. Subsection D is social implications of engineering, and that has 3 subsections, which is promoting and safeguarding the health and safety and welfare of the public, 2, demonstrating awareness of the consequences the work performed may incur, 3, following a code of ethics. And then E is existing language, which was formerly B. And then F is added to say that no partial credit will be awarded for experience which does not fully meet the criteria listed in the above sections of E. Applicants are limited to gaining 1 year of credit from the options listed above towards progressive experience in the practice of engineering. And that concludes the changes of the rule. I did send this out in advance via email to interested parties who I signed up for electronic notifications of changes to our rules. No comments were received via email prior to this hearing. Mr. Scholes, were any written comments received by the board office regarding these rules?
None, no.
Thank you. So at this time, I would like to open it up for any public comments from those present at today's meeting. And because these aren't controversial in nature, there might not be any comments. Like I said, there have been none received in advance of this meeting. So I'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll move on. You can unmute yourself or, like I said, put in the chat box that you would like to be acknowledged, and Dustin can help you.
Yes, this is Frank Webster. I do have one question, and this is out of ignorance, but for the engineering education and experience, how is this recorded? Who keeps records of this, or how is this recorded? Is this done by the individual or by the person that's mentoring the experience, or how is that done?
Thank you, Frank. I'm going to turn this over to one of the engineering committee members. They evaluate these applications, so and they can respond to this question.
Maria, this is Ricky. I can give a response and have others add to it if needed. Frank, the applicants describe their experience on their application form, and if more information is needed, they may be asked for more information, more of a description, but the description of their experience comes from the applicants.
I guess my question is it's like, the board members are not, mentoring or overseeing all these, how they're gaining experience. It would be somebody in their office, I'm assuming another engineer overseeing this. Is there anything coming from them?
Yeah, Frank, this is Robert. Yeah, that's what happens too, that the applicant lists their experience and their references verify that experience is accurate. Whether it has been a direct supervisor or somebody that has worked with them on that particular experience that they're listing. So we do get an independent evaluation from people that should have knowledge of that experience.
Okay, and one last question. Is the person that oversees them, do they have any schooling, for lack of a better description, as to how to oversee the experience requirements?
I'm not 100% sure what you're asking, but let me try to answer it this way. We have to three of the references have to be from professional engineers. So, I mean, we've always assumed that the engineer would know. A professional engineer should know what the other professional engineers should look like, but there's no training class or anything that says here's how you oversee an engineering applicant that I know of.
Oh, okay. All right.
Frank, this is Alton. I may have misunderstood your question. Were you also asking how the engineer who's applying for licensure or applying to sit for the exam knows to get the references?
Took me a while to unmute myself. No, but that's a good question. I was, what I'm doing is kind of making comparisons to the architectural experience program, and the people that, certify that the applicant has, met their experience requirements, on an hour, how many hours they spent on this part or that part and so forth. And there is instruction on how to do that. And I mean, Robert, you're right. I mean, an experienced engineer should be aware of, how to evaluate things, but it kind of leaves open the possibility of, being, having a star young person trying to be, wanting to be an engineer, and their mentor give them some hours, and that's kind of where I'm headed with that.
Hey, Frank, that's a wonderful point. Because sometimes when you read the applications, and we've had this discussion internally, you're not sure if the person, even though they've been working with the applicant, you're not sure if they're doing it, giving an honest evaluation sometimes. You don't know if they are, like you said, kind of doing it to promote somebody that's in their company, that makes it, look better from a company standpoint. And we've had that discussion. I think it's something we probably, as an engineering committee, and it wouldn't take a rulemaking. I think it's more in the application package that we send out, may need to have some better instructions or something for the people doing, because we've had that discussion. So that's a great point, but we've probably not addressed it over time like we should have.
Yeah, I've obviously not got a problem with the rulemaking, the what's taking place here, the I think it's making a better, more obvious way to accumulate hours. So I've got no problem with the rule. It's just, and I don't really have a problem with y'all's process, but it just comparing the architectural experience versus this is more open, let's say.
Frank, I agree. This is Ricky. I think by nature, architectural practice is more, I guess, pure is a term in terms of there's more common task. Engineering is so diverse from the different disciplines and the different industry sectors it could be in. I think it's more all over the map than somebody who's working in architecture. And so it's kind of difficult. I think you run into more diverse tasks that people do in their jobs. I hope that's kind of a fair statement. But there is, I will say, is on the website, if you're looking to apply to be a professional engineer, it leads you to this kind of language about what kind of experience you need to have and what the process is. So there is some coaching information there, but the applicant has to take the initiative there.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public or? Okay, seeing none. Sorry.
We did have one from Chris Gwaltney.
Go right ahead.
It says, this is Chris Gwaltney with ASCE. Are the rule changes being discussed available online?
Yes, they are, and that link is sent out. But Chris, I'd be happy to get your email and send you the link to those rules. If you just want to put that in the chat, and Dustin can forward that on to me, I'd be happy to send you that.
Yeah, it's Casey Anderson. If you don't mind sending that to me as well, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, if there are no other comments for this, we'll move forward. So that concludes the substance of reading the rule. And now we will take roll call to adopt the rule. I will need a motion to adopt as required by TCA 45222. So first, we will adopt the hearing language that was read and sent out. So, Michael, can you please go ahead and do a roll call vote for this?
Absolutely. Let me start with Mr. Tibbs.
Do we need to officially make a motion in a second?
I'll make the
Yes, I'm
motion
going to start.
to adopt.
Was that Rob?
It is.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Robert. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, if not, I will call the roll for the vote. Mr. Tibbs.
Aye.
Mr. Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Brigta.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Waxter.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great. Next, we will need to adopt the regulatory flexibility addendum and the economic impact statement. That was sent in advance to you all. I'll just read it. It's short. Pursuant to TCA 45401 through 45404, prior to initiating the rulemaking process, all agencies shall conduct a review of whether a proposed rule affects the small businesses. Proposed rules do not affect small businesses directly. The rule amendment clarifies and updates standards pertaining to progressive experience required for engineers. This amendment aims to keep Tennessee rules consistent with other jurisdictions by allowing license portability for future licensees. The board foresees minimal, if any, impact to consumers with the promulgation of the proposed rule. An exemption for small businesses would not be beneficial. So I will need a motion, second, and roll call to adopt the regulatory flexibility addendum.
This is Robert. I make a motion to accept the regulatory flexibility addendum.
This is Rob. I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Michael, you want to take the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Brigta.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Waxter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Let's see. Okay, next we need to adopt the impact on local government statement pursuant to TCA 45228. And this is just one sentence. The Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners receives no impact on any local government. So we'll do this, and there's a document. It's the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee, and that is questions A through E. I sent that in advance to all of you, so if you just want to briefly review, if you have any questions or comments about that, I'm happy to answer those. But if not, we just need a motion and a second to adopt the impact on local government statement, as well as the information required by the Joint Government Operations Committee.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept the impact and the information statements?
Ricky, this is Robert. I've looked at this and it looks acceptable to me, so I make a motion we approve it.
And this is
Rob,
Blair.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Michael, hearing none.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Burside,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Forgive me, I was muted. Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you all. That concludes all the voting I need. Thank you for your patience during the hearing. At this time, the rules will be held for additional comments. And then if no substantive changes, which there are none following this hearing, these rules will be put on the rulemaking filing form and submitted to the Attorney General's office for review and approval. Once the Attorney General's office signature is obtained, these rules are filed with the Secretary of State and generally become effective 90 days from the date of filing. So that concludes the rulemaking hearing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Maria. Michael, this is Ricky. I think it could be a time right now for a big upgrade and have Mr. Tibbs start to preside the meeting if that is appropriate.
Since he is present and chairman, then yes, I would agree that Mr. Tibbs can take over that role.
You're doing such a fine job.
I assume that I am done for this morning unless you all need me for something else.
Now, Ms. Hales,
Correct, Jenny.
sorry, go ahead, Maria.
I'm sorry, Michael. Yes, Jenny, thank you. That's all we need you for this morning. I appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Tibbs, we are now at the grant extension requests, and we have two universities, representatives from two universities today, UTC and ETSU. These two universities are asking for extensions in use of portions of their grant funds received in this past award cycle. And I would like to start with Mr. Doman from UTC and just allow Mr. Doman the chance to articulate the situation for UTC.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a year, and as part of our request, we had supported student travel to competitions and conferences. And since those didn't happen, we would like to request an extension in order to allow us to do that in the coming year as things reopen and get rescheduled, and hopefully we come through the pandemic.
So, Michael, do you should I ask for open it up for discussion amongst the members right now, or what would be the right protocol?
You could do them one at a time, or we could allow Mr. Isham from ETSU to give his synopsis, and then you could ask questions of them both at the same time, or you can do it one at a time. It's really up to you. Which would you prefer?
I guess it might be just for protocol. I guess maybe it'd be better to do one at a time, just in case we had some specific questions for one, if the members are okay with that. So with that, I'm gonna open it up just for, and we'll take them one at a time. So open it up for discussion.
Hey, Brian, this is Alton. I've just got a quick question. I don't know that we've had this request before, and we may have in the past, but from the staff's perspective and from the legal perspective, do we have a time limit on when these funds have to be expended? That's one question. And the second question is, are we able to carry that grant over if it's not expended into another fiscal year? I'm not sure about what the protocols are for that.
Alton, this is Michael. In the past, it's been my experience, and the way I learned this process was that if money is not expended by the end of the term, then that money is returned. It is not carried over. Now, last year there were a number of extensions granted, I believe, because of the COVID process, because of the COVID situation, but they were all granted prior to my joining staff here. So I'm not sure what the process was for those or the consideration, but I do know that we had a number of schools with extensions that went further into the year.
Michael, this is Rob. Do we have the, not knowing whether somebody else is really in control of this, do we have the responsibility or authority to recommend that the funds be carried over and then let the financial people tell us whether that's allowable under state law or not?
I'm sure we could make the request. Maria, I believe, Maria, you're still with us, correct?
I'm here. Thank you, Michael.
Do you happen to know an answer to that, or should I can reach out to members of the, members of the contracts team?
Yes, so Sherelle Hooper is our contracts attorney. She's kind of the specialist on this issue, and I will say, if I recall correctly, that is not allowed. You know, that's kind of a hard and fast rule. But you know, we could always make the request and see how it comes back. But just from, I think, prior years, you know, the standard has been that the funds are not allowed to be carried over. So.
Maria, this is
Well,
Alvin.
yeah,
Have there
I'm
been
sorry.
any
Go ahead.
exceptions made? I'm sorry. Have there been any exceptions made due to the COVID issue? Or are there exceptions that are acceptable because of the COVID issue?
That I'm not sure on. I mean, it's something we'd have to check, just because, you know, with the fiscal year coming up in end of June, I'm sure this is like kind of the first time maybe that this has arisen. So we can certainly check. And I will say, just for your all knowledge, that this is outside of our department, and it kind of fiscal is a different department that regulates and sets the standards for a lot of these things. So certainly we can ask. I just don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't have any inclination as to whether or not that'd be allowed.
As an alternative, could we ask that they resubmit their application and alter the funding and have a called meeting of the grant committee and ask them to review and approve whatever the alternate request would be, and then bring it up at the June board meeting?
Yes, I think that's a great alternative. And last year we had the same issue whenever certain schools wanted to use their funds for different projects due to COVID. So certainly, you know, that's a great option, Alton.
Alton, this is Michael. We have received official amended proposals from both universities. I believe I sent them to you earlier this week. But yes, we can coordinate a special meeting of the higher education committee or the grants committee and talk about this. I do know, after I just received word from Sherelle Hooper on the contracts team, that because these grants are based on annual appropriations by the General Assembly, they don't carry over.
Okay, then could we ask while we have the representatives with us today from ETSU and UTC, would they be amenable to modifying their request?
Mr. Doman?
Todd, do you want me to field that question?
If you would, please, yes.
Yeah. This is Bradley Harris. I'm one of the faculty that submitted the proposal in engineering at UT. Yeah, we have basically preliminary discussions about what a backup plan would look like. So I do think we're amenable to that, if that's the route we need to go.
I tell you what if we, since we're talking more generalities, do you guys mind if we hear both reports then, just on the way this discussion is gone? And then I think we have an idea maybe of the motion, but since we're talking general that will actually affect both schools, do you mind if we hear from the next school and then we'll kind of wrap up this discussion or add to it if necessary? Is that okay? Okay.
Okay, Mr. Isham from ETSU.
Yes, thank you for having us today. We have the same concerns as UTC. Had some on-site visits for students to go to. Where we were going to help a local museum do some upgrading about some of their sites, and with COVID, it kind of knocked that out. We waited to the last possible second to ask for an extension, just hoping that it would change. We can move that project into the fall semester and have students have that on-site type of experience with a real client.
Yes, this is Frank Waxter. I've got a question for you on the, I do have a copy of the ETSU proposal. I'm not sure I have one of the UTC, but there are several items. I guess my question is how much of the request is for carryover, even if we can do it? It looks like the trips total $1,600, but there's, the total grant was $4,060, and has everything but that been expended? I guess is my question.
It's only, I'm asking for the extension only for the trips, Alton. We're working on getting the rest of the money spent out.
I think, again, this is Alton. I apologize. I think it sounds like we may not be able to continue the trips beyond June 30th, continue the allocation beyond June 30th for the trips. And unless you're going to take those trips before that date and expend those funds, it appears that we're really not able to carry that over. If I understand correctly, Maria, and I'll bow to your experience on that. That's what I thought I heard you say. If in fact that is the case, then I guess we would ask each of you to alter or amend, I should say, your previous request to exclude that component, but to add something back in to fill that dollar amount. Maria, can you comment?
So Alton, are you just saying that as long as it's before the funds are used before June 30th? Is that what you need clarification?
Yeah, if I understood correctly, that they would have to expend those funds before the end of this fiscal year. We
Yes,
can't
that is
carry
correct.
them over. So
Yes.
if they can spend the funds before June 30th on these trips, that's fine. But if they feel like they cannot, or trips or other, whatever the other allocation is, if they cannot spend those funds on what they originally included in their grant application before June 30th, then I would ask that they amend their grant application to the grants committee, resubmit it to the grants committee, so that we can get that approved for them and give them the opportunity to expend those funds before the end of this fiscal year.
That sounds like a great plan. And that's the correct understanding of, when they can be used.
I have
This
a
is Rick Thompson.
question
This is Rick Thompson. I have a
about,
question.
go ahead, Rick.
I'm a little confused, a little concerned. If they applied for this grant based on those particular items, what I'm hearing is that we're going to ask them to go back and revise their grant and figure out how they can spend that money on something else. To me, when they went through this process, that was a critical item and nothing else seemed to be of more importance. So I've got a little bit of heartburn with just saying, okay, here's another 20,000 or whatever the number is. Go figure out how to spend it. That's not what I think the grants are for. So I think if they don't spend it, then they're going to have to lose it. And I'm sorry it's a COVID related item, but it's just, that's just the way it is, I believe.
Rick, this is Alton, and I understand your perspective on that. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but however, what we asked them to do is present us their highest priority items. That doesn't necessarily mean that's all that they had on their list. That was just the items that they had that would meet their funding eligibility. There may be a list of other items that they may have had that were items that were somewhat critical, but maybe not as high a priority as those particular items that they submitted. So we're just giving them a chance to go back down their list of priority items and add whatever the next level of priority items that they have.
So you're saying that whatever was not submitted, what was submitted meets the requirements, but what wasn't submitted might have been on a priority list, but it may not have met their requirements.
It may have met the requirements, but they only had a certain allocation of funds that were going to be available to them anyway, and they I guess prepared whatever their proposal was to us based on what they thought the funds that would be allocated to them would be. I would ask the two representatives, do you have other items that are needs for your departments that you could use this money, this grant fund for, that were not part of your original application but would be unmet needs?
This is Bradley Harris from UTC. The answer to that question is yes. We had, as a group of faculty, discussed that, in fact, some of the money that we had allotted for maintenance of existing equipment, the need that we have is greater than what we forecast. And that was primarily where we were going to shift the funds. So we're not going to actually propose spending the money on something completely new. We're actually going to propose shifting more funds towards maintenance of existing equipment.
For ETSU, I just thinking off the top of my head, Alton, it's to meet the strict requirements of the one part of the grant. When students are leaving in 2.5 weeks, to do something like that might be a little more difficult for us. We're in pretty good shape equipment wise, but I'll have to put on my thinking hat and figure that one out.
Well, I think then, Alton, if you want to receive those additional requests, I guess I would just caution about just spending the money because it's there. If there's something, and no offense to the comments that were made, but if you think you don't know where you're going to spend the money, UTC has an idea of where they're going to spend the money because they have a need for it. where ETSU doesn't sound like they know where they're going to spend the money because they don't really know what kind of needs they have. So that's my concern, is that if it's justifiable.
Oh, we have plenty of needs, Rick. We just, to meet the requirements of what we can propose is going to be a little more challenging.
Well, are you up to that challenge?
Of course.
All right.
The way the grant proposals are written, it can't be used for very much equipment type purchases. It has to be different from equipment.
Actually, we do fund
I
equipment.
would refer back to the committee and let them make that decision on whether or not that money could be allocated for other things. I just bring that up because I don't think it's going to be something that we would like to see, or I would like to see, that, again, because I've got $1,500, I can go spend it. That's just my point. If it's something that's needed and it meets the criteria, then I would leave that up to the committee to make that decision and bring that before the board.
This is Rob. For a question for a novice here, is this grant something that is there's an application and a grant annually, or is this once every 10 years? I'm sorry?
Yeah, this is Alton. It is an annual grant to colleges, and it is made every year. And the grants committee does meet, and they do submit formal applications with an outline, a description of their specific needs and their justification for everything that they're asking for.
Is there any reason why we can't? I mean, it looks like $1,600 on one of them that is they're unable to spend. Is there any reason that can't be moved into the next year?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. We can't carry it over to the next fiscal year. It has to be spent this year.
Well, what I'm saying is, if it's not spent and it goes back to the kitty, is there any reason we can't increase next year's grant by the $1,600 that was not spent because of COVID?
Yeah, it would take an action by the board to increase the grant limits. We have a set amount that we adopt every year as part of the budget. So in the budget for this coming year, if we voted to increase the amount of the grants, we could do that.
Well, would we be willing, knowing that we had this very unusual circumstances and some of the money could not be spent, to, when we set our budget for next year, to increase it by the amount that they were unable to spend?
Alton, let me jump in here really quick, Alton. Let me jump in here. I think, and you maybe Michael or you actually too, as the chairman of the grants committee, I think based on what Rick said and what you mentioned previously, I think we do need the grants committee to meet again regarding these. Maybe can you make a recommendation in all these things? Even Rob, appreciate your comments. Maybe even some of the things he's brought up, but I feel like it should go back. This issue should go back to your committee. But if time is an issue and that can't happen, but I think that's the best way to go. And let me ask you, Rob, and then maybe if Michael, you want to weigh in on that.
Just real quickly, Brian, to answer Rob's specific question. Rob, the allocation is done by a formula, and a lot of that is predicated on the number of students at each of the locations. It's a kind of a complex spreadsheet. So just because we increase the budget by $1,600 doesn't necessarily mean that $1,600 would be attributed back to ETSU.
But we have the authority to do that. We can do the spreadsheet all day long and then say, okay, this couldn't be spent last year because of COVID, and then add that to the complicated spreadsheet. Am I wrong about that?
It doesn't mean you're going to get allocated that money, though, because of what Alton just said. There's a percentage, there's a formula, and that formula may not work out where you get the $1,600. It may only work out where you get $200 or $300 or $400. We don't know. So you're not guaranteed that money. That's, I think, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
It's not a rollover. We can't roll it over.
Yeah, Robin, I think I understand what you were asking. Can we just make a special allocation to one entity? And that traditionally has not been the way this has worked. It's again, a really specific, and I don't want to go into all the details on that. We're in a meeting and we need to continue on. But the other thing I wanted to ask too, Michael and Maria, is if in fact the board votes to continue this and defer it to the grants committee and come back with a recommendation, I'd like to do that really quickly, and I'd like to get the information back from both ETSU and UTC within the next, let's say, 2 weeks, if possible, and then convene a meeting of the grants committee to review that and get comments back to staff, and then therefore distributed back out to the board members so that we're prepared to move on it quickly at the June board meeting.
Okay, Alton, this is Michael. I will say that back when we initially awarded these grants, there were 2 or 3 institutions that needed to make changes to their initial proposals. I believe 1 or 2 of them called for payment of student workers or wages of some sorts. And at that point in time, the committee had granted me the authority, along with consultation with the legal team as well, to make sure that everything was set right. But as long as those proposals came back and they were within the scope of what was considered acceptable expenditures by the rules of the grant, that we could just go ahead and approve those and then send you all the confirmation on that. I don't know if you'd like to do it that way to help expedite the process, or if there's a greater need to discuss whether or not the award, that they should have the ability.
Michael, this is Frank. I kind of think we need to do what you're saying. I was trying to figure out the logistics of going through the grants committee and then bringing it to the board for approval. Our next meeting's in June, and really I'm questioning whether they can even, get approved and expend the funds by June 30th. If you could do what you're saying and expedite the process and just let us know. I mean, I think I trust you well enough to know, what can be done and what can't be done. So that would be, I would lean towards letting our staff handle it.
This is Blair. May I also maybe ask that, I wonder if the schools come back to us, they come up with their plan as to how they're going to expend the money by June 30. If that's not possible, then I'm afraid that's money that's going to be lost. But maybe have them come back to us, report back to us at our June meeting, and then we can decide, how much money will not be taken or not. Or I guess, Frank, that's what you're saying, is just allow staff to take care of that.
Yeah, I'm just seeing time as a problem here.
This is Rick. Frank, is that a motion?
Yeah, that's a good point, Rick. That's what I was about to say. Can what Frank said, can we just make that a motion and let's discuss that? I thought that was good. So Frank, can you just make that as a motion and then we can discuss it and vote on that?
Yeah, Michael, first, before I make a motion, Michael, are you comfortable with that, with what I was talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think we're equipped to handle receiving the amended proposals, and then between myself, Maria, and the contracts team, we can determine whether or not the amended versions fall within the criteria. And if we have any questions, obviously we know we can contact you all. But I think, yes, we're equipped.
Okay. Well, that made my motion kind of complicated, but I would like to move that we allow the Tennessee Board of Architects and Engineering staff to make determinations on the amended versions and then report back to the committee what the decision was.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is
This is
Rick.
Blair. I'll
that.
second that.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any more discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for roll call vote, Michael.
All right, Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And gentlemen from the universities, we will be in touch with you very soon.
And thank you both for joining. Appreciate your considering.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, with that under our belt, we'll move on to the professional society reports. And I want to ask Mr. Baltimore if he would like to kick us off today.
Yes, be glad to. Thank you for asking me. And hello to everyone. I'm Don Baltimore, representing the Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy Association. We are monitoring legislation this year. We have nothing major that we have pushed. We're interested in helping the A&E board and the other associations in what assistance is needed from us, and we are anxious to see if the legislature will be adjourning as fast as they hope to, which is the end of this month. So we are still continuing to meet, but it's all by distance and Zoom and WebEx, and doing the best we can getting out the continuing education programs and other news to our membership. So that's really my very short report, and anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay. Could anyone hear me?
Yeah, we
Okay,
did. We heard
oh,
you.
good. I've got
Yeah.
a new laptop, and sometimes it wants to work and not work.
No.
I
No,
blame
you
the
were
laptop, not operator error.
No, you were loud and clear. Michael, I'm just going to let you continue to call them out if it's okay with you.
That's absolutely fine. Actually, all three of us started to talk at the same time. So let's see. We have Ashley Cates from AIA's on, I think still. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Or yeah, it's still morning. Ashley Cates, I'm Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. I don't have a lot to report. We're still, going through legislative session, monitoring bills and legislation. It's been pretty quiet. We're excited about the fact that the governor is supporting capital projects, improvements, and maintenance projects across the state. So we're excited about getting that rolling, and continuing our education. We're going to have a virtual conference at the end of August. We just wrapped up a Speak Up series at the beginning of March. That was a really terrific series on advocacy and making an impact at the local and state levels. And then we are rolling out a disaster assistance training program in June. It would be an afternoon of June 3rd and then the morning of June 4th. And we're going to try to get that approved by 10-SAVE to be able to get architects, engineers, contractors, all of the above trained. So when disasters strike, they will be covered under the state, and they'll be ready to roll out as they need assistance at the local levels. So that's where we are. And we're excited about the rest of the year. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions for Ashley? All right, hearing none, we will move on to Casey Anderson, and Casey will also be delivering a report for Mr. Nathan Ridley today.
Thank you very much. Nathan Ridley with the Landscape Architects sends his regrets. We are tag teaming a few things today and working on a couple bills together, and we've got one on the floor that he is working for this morning, and I'm with you. So appreciate you all very much. We have been real busy across the street, and unfortunately I've missed the last two engineering committee meetings, so I apologize to all of you. I look very much forward to catching up on those videos this weekend. I've got a couple of things. So the landscape architects are sort of wrapping some things up across the street, and the governor is releasing his administration amendment, which includes his budget final package early next week. So that means that's sort of the beginning of the end of session, and we're looking probably realistically at this point, the beginning of May to get out of there. So Nathan will be back with us next time. I've just got a few things. Again, I represent the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. ACEC's National Spring Conference and Legislative Summit is again going to be virtual, but it's going to be really good, and we're excited about it. Chris Wallace, who is a host on Fox News, is doing a fireside chat. We've got CEO roundtables, and there will be a lot of focus on, we're really excited about some of the infrastructure priorities that are included in the American Jobs Plan, and working really hard with Congress to fix a couple of things that tweak a couple of things that have come out of the some of the laws and rules around PPP and some other things. So we have congressionally been really busy and excited about the opportunities to for professional engineers and to promote professional engineers and the work that they do within the new American Jobs Plan. We have been doing quite a bit of online coursework since the last AE board meeting. I went back and checked. We've had 437 people show up at virtual PDH sessions. We've had some really good ones. We are continuing to have monthly. Our chapters are meeting monthly across the state. We did one last week out of the Knoxville chapter, but the whole state. It's so much easier to have the whole state involved when it's virtual. So we did a session on communicating with non-engineers done by Shannon Looney, who is a PE and a fellow of NSPE. And then we had another day where a PE from Keller North America did a case study on a retaining wall failure at a big box store, and the sort of how they went through the resulting emergency sorry, my watch is going off. The emergency stabilization program that they had to initiate following that. So really, some really cool stuff that they've been looking at. Next week, well, the 22nd, I don't even know what day it is right now. In a couple of weeks, we are hosting a Southeast Regional Ethics Seminar with Rebecca Bowman, who is the Senior Director for Ethical and Professional Practice at NSPE. She's going to examine some case studies that involve ethical principles, including the evaluation of the ethical decision-making and the consequences of those decisions and the effects on the profession that resulted from those decisions. So really excited about that focus on ethics of late. Our chapters, our smaller chapters are starting to meet in person, and this month will be honoring the latest set of folks who have passed the PE exam and are new PEs in Tennessee. And the larger chapters, I think, are going to hold off another month and see if we can't get those in person so that they're a little more meaningful. NSPE is actually something that probably will come to this group at some point in the near future. NSPE is starting to take a really meaningful look at the engineer's creed that is used by lots of folks around the country. Their diversity and inclusion task force committee has had some recommendations that are, as you might imagine, somewhat controversial. That's not something that I think engineers in general, it's so ingrained in who they are and what they do that it's a bigger discussion than that. But it's opened this can of worms that's actually providing for a really meaningful discussion on the profession and where it's going. So I will keep you in the loop on that, because it's been an ongoing piece for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Looking forward to 2 planning sessions. ACEC will be the middle of June. TSBE will likely also be a little toward the end of June. But anything you all would like, if there's anything you all decide that you would like them to take a longer look at, we're happy to do that, because that will hopefully be a couple of days in person with them. And then our engineers conference will be September 12th through 14th, and we are gunning toward in person, though not putting that out in writing quite yet. That might be all I have. I appreciate you all very much, and sorry I've been a little bit absent, but you know where I've been.
Thank you, Casey. Are there any questions for Casey?
I have one quick, this is Alton, I'm sorry. Casey, if you find out that we would be able to hand these certificates off to the newly, the new licensed engineers, would you please let Rob and I know? I'm sure we would both love to attend that ceremony and do the presentation as we normally do if you want us to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Alton, and I'm glad you brought that up. So we, this board, I think, if I'm correct, decided that Michael was going to send the PEs. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, but this wasn't the final decision, that the actual certificates were going to come via mail from the board. Is that right, Michael? Is that where we landed?
Yes, that is correct. And the first wave of that has already gone out.
Perfect. So Alton, here's what we're doing in lieu of that, because it was getting really confusing and anyway, that's what the board decided. You all decided. So we are putting together a different certificate of sorts that is, so that we can just run them for the folks who are coming to those meetings. But I actually think it would be even more valuable if we can design. I've got a couple of folks talking about it, Randall Breaker and some others out, and just so you know who, thinking through that process. But I may have Randall reach out to you just to talk about it, because I do think there's a way that we can make it, try to make it even more meaningful perhaps than it has been. But the first chapter that's going to see them in person is that it's now called the Southern Middle Tennessee chapter of TSBE. They merged 2 of those chapters together, but it's Randall Breaker. So
Okay.
thank you.
Well,
But yes, I think it's important for y'all to be involved.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think everybody enjoys that. I know I always have, and just getting the chance. If we do nothing else, then acknowledge them, ask them to stand and introduce themselves, and congratulate them. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yes, and we're definitely still going to do some sort of dog and pony show for them, because a lot of them always they'll bring their families or their coworkers, wives, parents, etc. So it's always an exciting time. So we do want to make sure that when we do that for them, which is usually twice a year at each chapter, that the focus of that meeting is something that's very specific to the professionalism and the something that's very meaningful to the new PEs, but to also make it a big deal, because it is a big deal. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Casey.
Michael, this is Blair. May I step in and say that in Nathan Ridley's absence, just a reminder that Tennessee ASLA is hosting the National ASLA meeting on November the 22nd. So the Tennessee chapter is busy working with National to put all that together. But as Casey said, we're still in hopes that that's going to be an in-person meeting. So we're moving forward with that. That's it.
Thank you, Blair. Any further questions or comments for any members or any representatives of the professional societies? All right, thank you to the representatives, and we can move on to the legal case report. Stuart?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, number one is 20200975991. Complainant alleges that a building permit for renovation of a multifamily building was held up for months because of respondents' refusal to sign and seal documents. Respondent failed to submit medical, electrical, or plumbing drawings, and minimum code standards were ignored. Complainant further alleges that the owner, developer, respondent, and city codes chose to ignore the standards, causing a public safety issue. Respondent accuses complainant of being a disgruntled employee that was overlooked for a promotion. Respondent denies all allegations and explains that the project consisted of a two-story building less than 4,000 square feet that was gutted, unoccupied, and still under construction. Respondent also has all drawings used for permits and renovation that were required. Respondent states that no violations have occurred due to the building not having any final inspections made for the certificate of occupancy. After review, there were no violations as the project did not require to be stamped and is premature in nature due to not being inspected yet. This was reviewed by board member Brian Tibbs. Mitigating factors are exemption under TCA 62-2-102B. However, all drawings were submitted and properly sealed. The recommendation is to close.
All right, thank you, Stuart. Any questions about this one or discussion? Or motion?
Brian, this is Frank. I move that we accept the recommendation to close.
Okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Ben, I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, Michael, do our roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktow,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Dawes,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Stuart?
Number two, 2021002011. Complainant received an electronic copy of a plan which depicted a subdivision layout, various engineering design items, and revisions to roadway and lot layout from an unregistered engineering firm. The engineer of record allegedly is unregistered also. After review, the plans are not construction plans, just a concept plan, and not required to be stamped by a registered engineer. This plan at issue was a concept plan ordered by the court that is in the process of being amended before proceeding with licensed engineers. Respondent is not using the appellation of engineer. This was reviewed by board member Stephen King. Mitigating factors plan is only a concept plan and not required to be stamped, and there's no appellations being used. Recommendation is to close.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Any questions or comments or motion?
This is Blair. I'll make a motion to close.
Okay, it's proper motion. Do we have a second?
This is Rick. I make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Michael, we're ready for roll call.
Can I ask a question? Is it time
Yes,
for
sir.
a second? Can we ask?
Yep.
Steve,
Sure
the question is for my part, this is Robert. Was this concept plan submitted to a building official or a local code agency?
This is
No,
Steve King.
Go ahead.
Robert, the plan was submitted to a planning agency. It looks like a preliminary subdivision layout of a planned unit development. It does show a private street layout. It shows contours. It shows proposed detention pond location and a typical street section. I do think, I agree with what Stuart said, that it does not require a stamp. I think even in my area, that may not require a stamp at this point. It is somewhat misleading. The person that submitted this drawing has no reference to an engineering firm. They are a drafting service.
What, and the only reason I ask is because, and I think it's in our rules, that anytime we're required that if we submit something for review in an official capacity, that we have to have that stamped, regardless of what state it's at. So you think this is more just something that somebody put together and said it was really not an official submittal, it was more of a just to kind of get a conversation started. And sometimes I know more municipalities are asking to do that very preliminary work on the front end before an official submittal. So I just want to make sure that's not the case.
I think it was an official submission, but Stuart, you might recall more than I do about that.
Actually, it was just a draft of a concept of what's going to happen. And this was done by court order because I think there's some litigation between the engineering firm and another engineering firm. And so this was just a draft. It was not a licensed engineer or didn't need to be a licensed engineer to draft this.
Stuart and Steve, did the plan have either preliminary or draft noted on it anywhere?
Yes, it had in the title block preliminary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, and that answers my question too. And the reason, and I know you all have experienced this. Sometimes people will take your sketches and your drawings and actually try to submit those, for approval. And sometimes those get through the process. And so we've got a rule that says anything that's submitted for approval has to be stamped, signed and stamped by the licensed registrant, so that there's some validity to what we're doing. But this sounds like it's a one-off kind of case. Okay, I'm good. I just want to make sure that was the case.
Okay, thanks. I think, so we still have a motion and a second on the floor. I think we're ready for a vote now, Michael?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktoff,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Waxer, or Mr. Waxer, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Stuart, we're ready for the next one.
All right, number 3, 2021-011051. Respondent self-reported disciplinary action from Louisiana. Respondent is a professional engineering firm authorized to do business in several states that failed to obtain a license to provide services in Louisiana. All individuals performing the work were all duly and appropriately licensed. However, the failure of the firm to obtain the necessary license resulted in the subsequent consent order. This was reviewed by board member Alvin Heathcote. Mitigating factors are there's no violations in Tennessee. Recommendation is to close with a letter of caution.
All right, any questions or discussion or motion?
I make a motion to support the decision of the committee.
Okay, that's a motion. We have a second.
This is Blair, I'll second.
Okay, it's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Okay, Michael, I guess we're ready for a roll call.
All right, and I was following along with the document. Mr. Bricktoff, was that you that made the initial motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Number 4, 2021-016811. Respondent self-reported disciplinary action from Florida. Respondent was selected to participate in the audit process of verification for the current renewal period. Respondent submitted all copies of 18+ continuing education hours earned during the 2017-2019 biannual renewal period. Respondent received a letter stating that although an approved online course was taken for the required 1 hour of continuing education, it was earned outside of the allotted time period in 2019. Disciplinary action was dropped and an administrative fee was issued. This was reviewed by board member Alton Heathcote. Mitigating factors are no violations in Tennessee, and the recommendation is to close with a letter of caution.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or comments or motion? Checking again. Anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, this is Blair. I'll make a motion to follow the recommendation, that is to close with a letter of caution.
Okay, great. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Ricky. I will second that.
Okay, thanks. Any more discussion? Okay, Michael.
Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, number 5, 2021-016211. Respondent self-reported discipline issued by the Ohio State Board of Registration for Professional Engineers and Surveyors. Ohio opened an investigation after respondent voluntarily surrendered his license in Kentucky after allegedly stamping plans without obtaining registration. Respondent did self-report the Kentucky discipline in 2020 to this board, and a letter was sent. This was reviewed by board member Stephen King. Mitigating factors are there are no violations in Tennessee. The recommendation is to close with a letter of caution.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Open for discussion. Seeing no discussion, do we have a motion?
Brian, this is Frank. I move that we follow the recommendation and close with a letter of caution.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Do we have a second?
Second, Rick Thompson.
Thanks, Rick. Any more discussion? All right, Michael.
Thank you. Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're to the representations. Number 6, 2020-079-391. This is where a respondent self-reported practicing on an expired license back in 2018. They had made 23 HUD foundation inspections of mobile homes that were required by FHA loans, and they did seal each one of the inspections. I spoke to this respondent, and there was some new information, and it really came down to the address that the respondent has in West Virginia requires a P.O. box, and apparently we did not have that P.O. box on the address back in 2018. So the respondent reached out to explain that the HUD foundation inspections that are subject to this complaint, families in West Virginia, were required to have the foundations of their manufactured homes inspected by a registered engineer. However, were not able to afford these inspections. Most of the local registered engineers refused to perform the work, and respondents, quote unquote, volunteered to inspect with minimal payment, mainly for travel and expenses, since no local engineers would assist. The respondent further explains that his renewal was not received at the correct address. All other renewals were received, including the Tennessee privilege tax renewal. And when I say other renewals, other states that he's registered in, he did receive those and did renew. These notifications were sent to a P.O. box, but the Tennessee engineer license renewal was not. This office reviewed the renewal letter and did verify that the P.O. box was not included in the respondent's address. This address was subsequently updated with the correct information. The respondent fully understands that he provided services on an expired license, but expressed concern about the amount of civil penalty involved. The respondent explained that due to COVID-19, his firm has seen a decline in revenue and requested the penalty to be reduced to at least half the amount. The respondent respectively requests the board to review the penalty only, not the violation itself. So the new recommendation is just consider reducing the penalty and have a discussion, but that's where we are on this.
This is Rick Thompson. I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, okay. What am I missing? What? I'm sorry. There it is. The penalty of $2,300. That was my question. My apologies.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Alton.
Yeah, go ahead.
Time allows.
Yep.
I'm curious about if and again, in looking at this, I noticed that he's providing this service in West Virginia to families in West Virginia. Why was he using a Tennessee seal, or was he using a Tennessee seal on his drawings, or I'm sorry, on his reports?
He was not. He was not using a Tennessee seal because it was in West Virginia.
So he was using a West Virginia seal, but he was expired in Tennessee?
Yes.
Has he practiced in Tennessee and used an expired seal?
Actually, I don't know if it was if he was actually practicing in Tennessee at the time. I just know that he self-reported that his license had expired.
He may want to amend his self-reported report by and indicate if he's actually used his Tennessee seal during the time period that it was expired. I'm not sure we need to probably report this to the West Virginia Society. I'm assuming his license in West Virginia was current.
Yeah, let me explain. I apologize. It was not West Virginia. It was Upper East Tennessee, right across the border from West Virginia. So I apologize. That did not say West Virginia families. It was actually just across the state line in East Tennessee.
Okay,
so he was in Tennessee. So I apologize.
So in fact, the 23 incidences where he put his seal on the reports were performed in Tennessee using a Tennessee seal.
Yes, sir. Yeah, sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
That's my mistake.
That's okay. And again, as a follow-up opinion, if he was doing this somewhat benevolently, I know that we have the latitude, and in this particular case, we use that latitude to reduce the penalties and not go by exactly what's in the civil penalty sections of our rules. And I would be, given the circumstances and this follow-up information, I would probably be okay with reducing those penalties. I know that in preparing these reports, they're not paid a great deal of money anyway. If on top of that, he was doing it basically for travel time and expenses, that reduces his compensation even further. I strongly suspect that the amount that we would penalize him would exceed the value of his actual services performed. I'm not saying that that's a negative thing. But he has a reasonable excuse for why he did not renew. While it's incumbent on all of us to know what our registration dates are, and the fact is we didn't send it to the correct address or have the correct information to get it to him, and therefore he did not receive it, and he didn't therefore update, but he did self-report. So I would be willing to accept a motion to reduce the amount of the proposed civil penalty, even by as much as half.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, that's great. Michael, did you grab that motion pretty good?
I believe the motion was to, well, there was no,
I'm not sure
motion
I can make a
made.
motion.
There was a conversation, from what I got, was the conversation was Alton would entertain a motion for something of the kind, but there was no actual motion made.
So that's
Okay.
correct. And Michael, as a non-voting member, I'm not sure I can make a motion.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Alton.
Yeah, this is Frank. I would like to make a motion that we reduce the penalty to $1,300. I mean, to half of $2,300, which would be $1,150.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Blair. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Hey, Brian, this is Ricky. Does anyone remember if we have been lenient in the past when we didn't have people's correct address and that sort of thing? I'm sympathetic towards people who we don't get word to. I know we're all supposed to watch it, but I am sympathetic to that. But I'm trying to remember if we have had these cases come up before where we showed leniency.
Hey, Ricky, this is Alton. I'm not asking for leniency because he didn't receive it by mail. I think that's just a mitigating factor. My request for the leniency is based on the value of those projects and that the fact that he was doing it for just basically reimbursement of expenses.
I'm kind of remembering, in addition to that when there was a pretty good reason why people may not have received a renewal, that we have been lenient. But am I remembering correctly?
We've been lenient in the past on cases exactly like this where we haven't followed the civil penalty guidelines and the rules. We've minimized, reduced the amount below what the rules indicate would be the recommendation.
I mean, I'm okay cutting it in half. I would also be okay either taking it to the minimum of 500 or just a letter of caution, whatever the board thinks there.
Well, it's actually per event, and he recorded 23 events, and so that's what the reason we had come up with $2,300 at $100 per event to try to because of the mitigating factors. But then he's provided additional information which indicated that his services that he provided on this was because others would not provide the service, and he did it for travel and expenses. So to me, that's an additional mitigating factor that would justify reducing that civil penalty yet again. That's and Frank's recommendation of taking it down, his motion to take it down to $1,150, I think, is not unreasonable, probably for the value of the service that he rendered.
This is Rick Thompson. I have a question.
Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
We're proposing to do two things. One is reduce this by half, which would make this $50 per occurrence. I don't know what the man made per occurrence, but I'm betting it's more than $50. And then the other question I've got is, when did we make this ruling, and how does this relate to his COVID response? Was this done sometime in last year, or was this prior to that? I'm just trying to get some clarity on what that means.
This was first presented, I think, in October 2020, and because of the COVID during the year of 2020, his the amount is reducing. Like his his revenue has been reduced during 2020. So this was first read October 2020.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion or questions? Okay, if not, I think we do have a motion, a proper second.
Yes, sir, there is. Okay. Mr. Tibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Bursack?
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Barrick?
Yes.
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Wagster?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, number 7 is Selena's, and I'm going to let her take that over. Thanks.
Good morning, board members. This is Shalina Brown. For those of you who don't know me, I am also an associate general counsel in the legal division of the department. I am bringing this case back to you for reconsideration. It was presented originally to you in 2017. This is 2017-059-441. This respondent was first licensed in 2007. They are a professional engineer. This is going to be quite lengthy, so please bear with me. The complaint was filed by a Tennessee state agency that entered into a contract with an architect for construction of a building, and the contract was funded by a federal grant and other state funds. The architect hired the respondent and the respondent's firm as the structural engineer to serve as the consultant for the structural design of the building. After the construction began, there were complaints filed with the Office of the Comptroller's Office concerning the bidding process. An audit was conducted and there were errors that were identified in the bidding process. There was also another audit conducted by the agency because there were federal grant monies involved and there were discrepancies in the funds used for the construction. The agency project owner decided to suspend all the grant payments and canceled the grant with the contractor. The matter was turned over to a federal agency, the Office of the Inspector General, for an investigation, and the project was closed out. The state agency decided to contract with another engineering firm to develop a plan to weatherize the project and possibly complete the project later. This firm alleged that there were deficiencies in the structural design of the partially completed project and that certain floor beams should have been pressure treated. There were also concerns with the design, and the other engineering firm opined that the building could not be completed as it stood and would require extensive retrofitting or a complete demolition. The agency project owner decided to file this complaint against the respondent and the original architect alleging malpractice. Following our review and evaluation of the complaint, the department requested to meet with the complainant state agency project owner to further discuss and get additional information. The complainant agency project owner refused to meet with our office, and the complainant state agency refused to provide any further information or cooperate with the department concerning this complaint. Also, during this process, we did obtain a lengthy response to the complaint. The respondent stood behind all the work performed and stated the review conducted by the engineering firm for the weatherization of the project, the weatherization of the project was not proper because the review was conducted after the project had been left exposed to the outside elements for a period of 10 months. The construction building had not been properly weatherized. The respondent also stated the state agency merely filed a complaint to recoup the funds related to the mismanagement of the grant. The state agency project had adequate oversight and quality control powers throughout the design and construction phase and never intervened during the entire process. There were complaints about some of the decisions made by the contractor and the state agency project owner to conserve funds during the construction. Our office retained outside engineering experts to review and opine on this complaint. The two outside engineering experts reviewed this complaint extensively. The first expert reviewer emphasized that there are never a perfect set of construction documents, and the shop drawing review process is the last chance to correct minor deficiencies or clarifications prior to construction or installation. However, the expert report that was provided to our office was not sufficiently detailed. The second expert we retained did provide a comprehensive and thorough review of this case. This expert reviewed all the documents and an extensive amount of information and performed an in-depth analysis of the complaint. The expert provided the report and found that the use of the pressure-treated lumber was not careless or reckless and was proper, and ultimately both experts concluded the allegations contained in the complaint did not rise to the level of malpractice contained in the rules of professional conduct. There was no finding of any violations of the laws and rules of the Board of Architects and Engineers. This was reviewed by board member Stephen King. The mitigating factors when it was originally presented to you was that it was reviewed by two outside structural engineering experts. There were no findings of any violation or malpractice. The actual project was never completed. There were allegations of funding mismanagement by the project owner. The respondent was an employee of an engineering firm retained by the architect. The complainant is no longer interested in pursuing this matter and will not cooperate with the department or agree to provide testimony. Any deficiencies or errors or omissions that did occur did not rise to the definition of the term malpractice as referred to in our rules. I have received additional information from the respondent. This matter was also further reviewed by board member Stephen King and the outside structural engineering experts since it was originally presented to this board. The respondent's former engineering firm president has also provided a letter and a sworn statement to the board stating that his firm was retained by the project architects and the respondent was an employee of the firm and worked in the capacity of the project engineer. There was never any direct contact by the engineer with the project owner. The engineering firm and the respondent communicated with the architects and the general contractor and coordinated with the owner groups and building officials. The project had a very limited budget and the design was greatly impacted by the available funds. The design choices were restricted. The architect was also aware of the specific services performed by the respondent, and the respondent firm had financial limitations. There was also a complaint filed by the same complainant in this matter against the project architect, and that complaint was closed with no action. The architects were fully confident in the structural design services provided by the engineering firm and this respondent, and were aware that there was full compliance with all applicable codes and industry standards. The president of the project architect even stated the complaint was motivated by the state auditor's criticism of the state agency's performance on the project. The president of the engineering firm fully supports the work of this respondent structural engineer and stated even if there were any design deficiencies, there are never a perfect set of plans and there are always alternative methods of successfully designing a building structure. In this project, it was not possible to use 100-foot borings because of the financial resources were not available, and this was not the fault of the structural engineer. A site-specific study had been requested by this respondent, and the architect advised the owner could not afford site-specific study, and the geotechnical engineer recommended a site-specific study be used for a nearby site. There was not an issue with the design defect or issue with the seismic design of the, there was not a issue with the design defect or an issue with the seismic design of the project. An alternative method of design was used for the cantilever column lateral system because it was not an approved method in the prescriptive provisions of the ASCE 7. In most instances, the respondent was not responsible for communicating with the architect or the project owner. The building design was originally heavy timber, then it was switched to steel, and then moved back to heavy timber, and then returned to steel. Each of the structural system concepts would have incorporated a different blocking or load transfer system, and if any blocking or load transfer was missed at any point, it would have been easily remedied on the project. Based on all the expert review and analysis, there is insufficient proof for me to proceed with a formal contested case against this respondent for violations of the laws and rules of the Board of Architects and Engineering. There are a few other important considerations I'd like the board to consider. This respondent has been attempting to get licensed in another state for several years. This matter has been pending since 2017 with our office, and because of this complaint, the respondent's licensure in the other state has been held up for all this time. Also, this pending complaint has interfered with the respondent's current employment and could impact their current employment status. My new recommendation in this matter is to close. Thank you.
Well, I know that was a lot, but does anybody have any questions about that? I don't know if Stephen, you want to say anything specific
Hey,
about
Brian,
it
it's
either?
Robert Campbell. Whenever Steve finishes, I've got several questions to ask.
Well, maybe why don't you go ahead and spit them out, Robert, and then maybe Stephen can respond. Maybe why don't you just go ahead, Robert?
I'll just kind of throw a few things out just to see, and first of all, I see the words. Oh shoot, I lost it here in a minute. But crap. Never. Let me start. I keep hearing the words funding not available to do this, funding not available to do that. I also hear that the defense of the engineer was that they worked for an architect, so that somehow took them off the hook. I also see the word that malpractice was not committed. I don't know that every one of our complaints goes to malpractice. We've got thousands of complaints that we've reviewed over the years that have never gone to malpractice, but there is some sort of issue there. It seems to me that there at least is enough information here that there was some level of shoddy work done. And I wonder what our structural engineer report said. I remember, I think, from a past review of what our structural expert went through, that they had some findings that were not malpractice, but were, I'm going to use the word shoddy work. And it just seems to me that we've decided that this case is too hard, and we're not going to do anything to the engineer. And let me just say it from Robert's perspective. If every job I worked on, I just said, you know what, I work for an architect and they told me I don't have enough money, so I can just throw my professional responsibility out the door, man, my liability insurance would go down by half. I'd be happy. But that's not what we're called to do as professional engineers. So, Steve, go ahead. I'm sorry. Those are a few of my observations.
Mr. Campbell, let me just address that. First of all, this case has nothing to do with it not being hard or not being something that we can't pursue. The main problem is here, there are no violations here. The allegation was malpractice, and there is no finding of malpractice. And the other main problem I have here is I have a complainant that is not willing to go forward with this complaint. So without their testimony, it's very difficult for me to bring a case. So I can't go forward. That's the other issue. Under our rules, there was nothing that was found to be malpractice. That's the thrust of this entire complaint. It has nothing to do with not being able to bring the case because this is too hard.
Yeah, but Shalene, I get complaints that I review that somebody says the engineer did something wrong and they put down what they think. And in reviewing the case, no, they didn't do that, but they did two other things. So it may not be malpractice, but there seems to be a lot of stuff here when I read all these responses that there was something. And if it's a letter of caution, if it's whatever it is, there's something in between here, because the responses I hear sound to me like a lot of people trying to deflect a lot of stuff away from themselves for there not to be anything here. And that's my point.
I think if there's any issue, it was with the project owner, the original person who started this project, and that's where the wrongdoing was. I think we're blaming somebody in this situation that doesn't warrant any blame. And in fact, the complaint against the architect was dismissed by this board as well. So I don't believe there's any merit to this complaint.
Well, respectfully, we may have dismissed the one against the architect, and maybe we made an error in that. But I don't know that the project owner ever stamps or seals a set of plans. And we've all worked for project owners that have unrealistic expectations. And sometimes we walk away from those projects because the project owner is not what we have signed up for. So to blame it on the project owner, again, if I could blame all my bad projects on my project owner, I would have zero liability insurance. So thank you.
Maybe Stephen, do you have any maybe a follow-up?
It might be beneficial to go over our previous action. I don't remember what point this came to the board. I think it was in February of 2020, because it seems like it may have been one of the last meetings we had before COVID. But there was a very lengthy structural engineering report that was prepared by an outside consultant that the board hired to review this situation. And the consultant did note that there was no malpractice. And I was reviewing the report with Law and with the consultant. And I specifically asked the consultant, I felt like the board would want to know this, is why I asked, were there any design deficiencies in the structural design? And he did list, the consultant did list 4. And I'll briefly go over them. Number 1, failure to utilize site-specific earthquake design data. Number 2, failure to update calculations on the construction drawings with seismic design values referenced in applicable building codes. Number 3, failure to submit and have approval of the authority having jurisdiction for a code modification request. Number 4, failure to provide adequate blocking to transfer lateral loads from shear walls to the roof diaphragm. Now, based on my description, that was when the board voted to assess a $1,000 penalty. After that, I think it was in August of 2000, August the 1st, 2020, I was involved with Ms. Brown and the respondent and the respondent's attorney with a informal conference. At that point, the respondent offered some concerns that the respondent made recommendations to the architect that were not heeded to. So at that point, it did make me think that, you know, there was a problem with the design team on the project. The respondent really didn't feel like any design errors were made, other than in the 4th one, the respondent did admit that the design drawings did not adequately block the transfer of loads from the shear walls to the roof, but that design deficiency was caught in the shop drawing phase. The respondent admitted that the design was deficient, but that it was caught. So that was the result of the informal conference. After that, my recommendation was to issue a letter of caution. Then with and I'm really not sure with the new information that the state agency who filed the complaint was not willing to pursue it. I'm really not sure where that leaves us, but I'll leave that to the board for discussion. But that's a summary of my involvement in the process.
Board members, let me just also add that I have been advised by this respondent's attorney that if this board issues a letter of caution, letter of warning, or letter of instruction, it is more than likely that this respondent will be terminated from her current employment.
I would like the motion to support the recommendation.
Okay, we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion. This is Melanie.
Okay, we have a motion second. I do want to give another open for if there's any more discussion from you, Robert, or any other board member.
Brian, you know, I think I've said in my piece, I think that there was something wrong here. There seems to be that there have been some issues with the design and maybe issues with the architectural piece of it. I believe that at a minimum, there should be something when somebody comes up with something like this, there should at least be something in someone's file. I hear the excuses that are made, and these to me are horrible, horrible excuses. They're blaming somebody else for something, and usually when you deflect blame from something, you know you've done something wrong. And I'm really offended by another attorney from outside this agency trying to bend us over by saying if we do anything, the person's going to get fired. That's that seems to me to be, and I don't know all the legal terms, but it's damn extortive, it seems like to me. So I'm pretty offended about that. And I'm going to just let you know I'm voting against this recommendation because it doesn't smell right to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Any more discussion from anybody else?
Yeah, this is Frank. I totally agree with Robert. And it's like, this was a state project, and yes, there were circumstances that caused it to be stopped. But that doesn't change the fact that, and I reviewed the architectural version of this, and the experts that reviewed this, most of the questions were structural, and the experts that reviewed it found deficiencies. They just didn't feel that it came to the level of being called malpractice. But I still think there's a lot of issues here that are not acceptable. And so I also would vote against closing this. I would think that we would have at the very minimum a letter of caution.
Mr. Chairman, this is Alton. If I could take just a second.
Yeah, please.
I agree with Frank and Robert. Repeatedly, there were excuses made for not doing the right thing. I mean, if somebody said they couldn't afford to get a geotechnical report, or somebody said they couldn't afford to implement the structural design as it was designed, and again, over and over and over, there seems to be this continual theme that budget was an issue. There's no excuse for doing poor engineering. There's no excuse for putting your seal on something that you know is not designed to the standard that you would hold yourself to. We've been in situations similar to this where we've had to walk away because the budget was insufficient, and we advised our client we need to rethink this and redo this, and either pursue additional funding or abandon the project altogether, because we refuse to do something where we don't have sufficient funds and we are asked to modify or put our seal on something that we're not comfortable with the design. So I agree with Robert and Frank that I'm not a voting member, but I have a lot of issue with the excuses that are presented for remediation of this and closure of this case. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
No problem. Are there any other that want to comment?
Hey, Brian, this is Ricky. When this case first came to me, I had to recuse myself from voting, West Tennessee, and so I probably need to recuse myself from this vote as well.
Okay.
This is Rob. Again, the novice question. Are our only options in this to accept the recommendation or not accept it? Or or is it common practice that we modify the recommendation?
Yeah, we have the opportunity to make our own recommendation. They give us a recommendation and we can either accept it or come up with a modified or totally reject it. We have that right as the board to make that. Does that answer your question, Rob?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
So I've sort of heard Robert say, make a suggestion of something more than just closing the case. And I'm just wondering, before we get around to making a motion, if we should talk about what we would do differently than close the case.
Well, let's, we do have a motion and a proper second already out there. And if their person making a motion doesn't want to change, I think we do have to act on that motion. I just was leaving it open for discussion to make sure anybody else didn't want to make any more discussion before we went to roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, this is Rick. Just before we vote, if you go back and look at the original board decision, we did authorize a civil penalty of $1,000. So.
Okay. Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
Okay, Michael, I guess we've had our discussion and we do have a motion on the floor. So do you want to call for roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
No.
Mr. Bursey.
Need to recuse from this.
Okay. Mr. Bricktop.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
No.
Mr. Campbell.
No.
Mr. Barrick.
No.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
No.
Mr. Wagster.
No.
Thank you very much.
So where do we end up with that, Michael? I wasn't doing a head count.
The motion did not pass, so the floor is still open for another motion.
This is Rick
Robert
Thompson.
Campbell.
I make
Okay, we got a couple. We got a couple out there. Who was that? Was that Rick or was that Robert?
Robert, go ahead.
This is Robert Campbell. I'll make a motion that we issue a letter of caution in this case.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Blair. I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Open it up for any more discussion.
This is Rick Thompson. Question: Are we not considering the original civil penalty of $1,000? Is that what your motion goes away from, Mr. Campbell?
Hey, Rick, yeah, I didn't put the civil penalty on there because I think there is, I did not. I just think there's some other things running around that may make that unattainable. But anyway, that's.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay. Any more discussion? All right, Michael, do you want to do roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Bursey, you're still abstaining.
Yes.
Mr. Bricktop.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes.
Okay, thanks. Was there another one?
That's it.
Well, that's it for the legal report. Correct, Stuart?
That is all for the legal report. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. This
Trying to
is,
get my agenda, Michael.
yeah, I just pulled mine up. Let's see. It's the director's report.
Director's report. Yeah.
So, would call your attention to the financial sheets or the financial sheet you received. This gives what I have as the most recent financials for the board. This is through January of 2021. Shows the net surplus at $381,000 for the year. I would like to point out that we are coming into our most expensive months of the years. This is where the grant money starts flowing out, beginning in March. So all that money is now processing out, and it'll start showing up as we move forward in these NPS sheets. But are there any questions about this at the moment?
Hey, Michael, this is Alton. I have one question.
Sure.
Over the past few years, the state of Tennessee has had a significant surplus in revenue, and I hope that continues to be the case. And I'm not talking about specifically our department or our board, but it also in the past, the state has, there's some terminology that's used. I don't remember what it is, but in essence, they evaluate the amount of the surplus that we have, the reserves that we have, and determine whether or not they want to take some of those back and reallocate them into the state's general fund. One of the things that I hope would happen is before that occurred, if it did occur, that we'd get some advance notice and the opportunity to defend our surpluses. And the second is, has there been any indication that that could occur this year?
I'm not aware of any, first, no, I have not had any indication that that is on the table for this year. You know, I don't know if it's in the statute, but we keep about 2.5 years. We try and keep 2.5 years of operating budget in our reserves. So that puts us pretty much in line with where we are right now, with another, you know, $550,000 set to come out of what's currently there. So that's when all of the grants, you know, that's the amount of money we gave away last year. So when all those grants are finalized and all that money's gone, there'll be a chunk of this missing, and you'll see it. So, you know, the numbers are a little skewed, and if anybody had said something to me about our numbers, at least our reserves right now, I would point to that, or I would point to that directly and say, you know, let's talk after these grant checks all go out.
Thank you, Michael. Just wanted to make you aware that that has happened at least twice that I'm aware of in the past.
Okay. I have heard stories about it happening to other programs, but just rest assured that if it was something that was on the table for this group, that we would definitely be talking about it. Any other questions regarding the financial sheet? Okay. I saw that Assistant Commissioner Martin has just joined us, and if I could, just indulge me for a second. I'm moving into the announcement portion here. We have a special message that I would like to make the first part of the announcement for. Dustin, would you mind sharing your screen and showing that message, please?
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second. And let me know if you guys can't see it.
I can see your screen. I can see your screen. Yes.
Okay, great.
Hey, Dustin, this is Rick Thompson. I'm on my phone. I'm not able to see any screen, so just letting you know.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
well, I'm going to go ahead and play it now.
We can't hear the video.
Okay, let's see. Sorry.
Isn't technology great? Everyone, bear with us just for a second. believe if you're on, you might have just gotten a message about a multimedia viewer.
Yeah, can everybody see that? Michael, can you see it?
I don't.
I do not.
I don't.
Nope.
Guys, it should be down in the lower right-hand part of your screen.
It's under the participants in that box.
Yeah, if you click.
Oh, okay.
Should say multimedia viewer, that there's an invitation to accept, and that may be our only avenue here to hear this message from the governor.
Okay.
Looks like it worked for me.
Yeah, is everybody good?
This is Alton. It worked on mine.
Okay.
So we just hit play and listen to it ourselves, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So are you guys not seeing it? Let me see.
This is Don. I can see it and hear it.
Okay. Let me try one more thing. Sorry.
We're still not getting the audio. Dustin, let me go ahead and just tell everybody that we'll be posting this video on the website. And if you have it down in your screen right now, you should be able to play it and listen to it. But it's a message from the governor, and the governor is stating his congratulations to the Architects and Engineers Board on 100 years of service, which is 100 years as of tomorrow. With that in mind, I would like to ask the Assistant Commissioner Alex Martin if he would like to chime in or if he has anything else to say as well. Alex?
Hey, Michael, can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Hey, appreciate that. Sorry, I had to scroll over from the other screen to unmute. First, I just want to say it's great to be with this group. Certainly appreciate the service that you all contribute to the state. A very, very, very important board protecting the health and welfare of our great state. And I think when you watch the message from the governor, he'll echo that sentiment far better than I could. And being an engineer himself, I think the governor has special appreciation for the work that this board does. So certainly hope that you all will take the opportunity to watch that. And then Michael, could you speak to? I think we have something else in mind as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we also have a proclamation received from the governor as well. There's a number of different things that we have planned and already enacted for this 100th anniversary. But let me start by reading the proclamation from the governor. We'll also post this to our website. It reads, State of Tennessee proclamation by the governor. Whereas the Tennessee State Board of Examiners for Architects and Engineers was founded in Nashville, Tennessee on April 9th, 1921 to facilitate registration and safeguard the public. And whereas this regulatory body serves business and government to improve the lives of Tennesseans. And whereas in collaboration with many professional associations, the state registration board members have stayed true to their mission to protect the health, safety, and welfare of individuals in and around the built environment throughout its history. And whereas the program and services developed by this body and adopted by the registrants have set the standards of practice for architects, engineers, landscape architects, and interior designers in the state of Tennessee. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lee, Governor of the state of Tennessee, do hereby proclaim April 9th, 2021 as a day to honor the 100th anniversary of the Tennessee State Board of Examiners for Architects and Engineers. And encourage all citizens to join me in this worthy observance. Signed by Governor Bill Lee and Secretary of State Trey Hargett. I have one or two hard copies of this that we'll have at the office. We'll probably get them framed and hang somewhere. When we get back to in-person meetings, I'm sure they'll be available for display. We have also initiated a media campaign that was sent out last night. There's an op-ed piece from the board that has been picked up at least online in Memphis, Knoxville, Nashville, and I have not seen yet from Chattanooga. But it's an outreach piece, explains to the general public, about the board, a little bit about its history and what the board does and how it can be helpful to the public. I would recommend that if you get the chance to surf your local paper, take a look for that. If not, just let me know and I will send you a link to your local newspaper. I believe I have the big three already. So,
Michael, this is Blair. Could you send a link out for that as well?
Sure thing.
I did not find it in our local paper this morning, but I may have missed it. So.
Sure thing. It was released last night in advance so that we could give the media some a chance to prepare for the actual day, as opposed to putting it out on the day of. Tomorrow we gave it to them with a day in advance so that they would potentially have some time to put it out there. That there's also been a press release, and we're putting out a blog post on our social media as well. So. Congratulations to you all for being servants of the board and being on the board at the 100th anniversary. I'm honored to have a very, very small role in this whole process, but what you all do is tremendous work, and it is appreciated.
Michael, I'm going to try one more thing to see if I can get this video going. You don't mind?
Sure.
And if this doesn't work, then yeah, we can send out the link. Did everybody get that?
I am not. I don't hear anything or see anything moving.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
I didn't either. I was able to listen to it and download it though, so it's a pretty cool message.
Dustin, Dustin, you have in your inbox right now, since you're already sharing your screen, a copy of the proclamation that is online. If you would mind showing that to everybody as well.
Sure. Just do.
For what it's worth, I got a message that WebEx wanted to download something from my computer, and I downloaded it and was able to hear the governor. So
great, thank you.
It came through, but probably a lot of people are blocking it unless you allow access.
Thanks for that, Rob. We'll definitely make sure our plan is to embed this at least a link to follow on the website, and we'll make sure that we get that up and running so that everybody who wants to can go and view it. So you're looking, Michael, now. Yes.
Oh, hey, sorry, Michael. This is Alex. I just wanted to chime back in and say appreciate Dustin showing the proclamation. I wanted to make sure everybody could see that. I also wanted to thank you in this venue. I really appreciate you drawing attention and raising awareness about this really important and special anniversary, and glad that we were able to recognize it in this way. So thanks for all that you've done to make this happen.
Well, thank you, Alex. And Alton Heathcote is the one who brought it up to me. So without his knowledge of the situation, I don't think any of this would have happened, at least in the time frame that it did. And by gum, we got lucky and caught it right on the actual anniversary. So just happy that we could get it done, and I'm glad to be a part of it and glad to work with everyone here. And let's see. That is it for my report. Mr. Chairman, we can go into the committee reports if you like right now, and with a special note that before you were able to join this morning, we did have one addition to the agenda, and that is the addition of a landscape architect committee report from Mr. Parker.
Okay.
And Brian, if I may ask a question of Michael, I recall at the last meeting, there was some type of mishap that took place with regard to mailouts back in December. And just following up on that, I'm assuming that all that's been taken care of, all that's been figured out and taken care of?
Yes, sir. We had, yeah, that has not come back up since. So yes, it's been taken care of.
Good, awesome, thank you.
Okay, let's start the committee reports. Looks like architects first.
Okay, this is Rick Thompson, and our committee met on Tuesday, April 6th, and we had two topics of conversation, and I'm gonna just let you know what those two are, and once I get those on the record, I would like to defer to Mr. Wagster as he was leading the conversation regarding these two. And the first one is the definition of the practice of architecture, and Frank will elaborate on where we are on that. And the second one was the reference manual, the TBAEE reference manual for requirements for the building design. And all of those definitions are, we will be referring back to the 1985 Standard Building Code for occupancies. So with that said, Frank, if you would, I would like to turn this over to you.
Okay, Rick. Yeah, as far as the definition of the practice of architecture, what we did was review the NCARB's proposed definition that's in their proposed model law revisions that they're planning to, send for approval at the NCARB annual meeting in June for approval by the NCARB committee. And so, we looked at it. There's some portions of it that might be a problem with the state attorney general, mainly in verbiage that reads something like the practice of architecture, and I'm generalizing, but includes, but is not limited to. And using verbiage like that leaves a pretty open-ended definition. And so we asked Maria to look at that particular aspect of it. And then I've actually, corresponded with the NCARB committee that produced that proposed definition. And their response to me is generally that it is a model recommendation, and that it's up to the state board to come up with their version. They can use it exactly like it is, or it may be amended. But anyway, that's where we are on that. We haven't made any decisions or have anything to bring to the board for approval as of yet. And it's our expectations that we will we're hoping to have something by the 1st of July to be able to include as the architect's proposed definition of the practice of architecture. And I know there's a definitions committee. I know Kathy Ware was the chairman of that, and I'm not sure that it's had any meetings since then, but that was all professions were involved in that, and I'm not sure I know where the other professions are. In other words, I've tried to see what would be proposed by the landscape, the architects, the engineers, and the interior. And so I think that the definitions committee needs to, this one wasn't really part of our discussion, but needs to get back in the business of trying to come up with the proper definitions. The other part of that we discussed was there's a TCA, I think it's 62-2-102 that refers to the type, how you determine the type of occupancy for a building. And in the way that's written, it just mentions that the 1985 standard building code would be used to determine the type of occupancy. It doesn't spell out what those requirements are, but the Tennessee Board of Architects and Engineers has a reference manual, a design reference manual, and it does quote verbatim all definitions, I guess you'd say, of the types of occupancy. For example, assembly or educational or business and so forth. And it's written out verbatim in that manual. And it has some aspects of it that are totally, I won't say opposite, but they do not agree with the present day building codes accepted. And I'm going to say by the state fire marshal, right now they're using the 2012 International Building Code and the 2012 NFPA 101. But the 1985 Building Code, when compared with the 2012 IBC, there are a lot of differences. In the last 35 years, the codes have changed in the way that you approach the design of a building. And so using the occupancy descriptions of the 1985 building code really doesn't make any sense. And so, you know, it's my thought that we should, and again, this requires a law change, but that we should revise that. And it has nothing to do with us trying to make us get richer or anything like that. It's just, we need to update the code. And so I would, my suggestion was to revise that TCA 62-2-102 to say that the building occupancy types would be as are defined in the building code that is adopted by the Tennessee State Fire Marshal. Now, and as an example, right now, that would be 2012. I've heard that they're in the process of wanting to update to the 2018. And then if you work at other areas of Tennessee, some local codes have adopted the 2015, the 2018, the 2012. And so I think tying it to what's accepted by the Tennessee State Fire Marshal would be the best. And then you deal, as we do now, with differences in local building code requirements. Anyway, we did ask Maria to look into what it would take to make this revision also.
Frank, it's Robert Campbell. no issues with what you're saying. I do remember from a long time ago, John Cothran saying that those words, the reason it was in there was somewhere in Tennessee Code annotated. They were the definitions of a house or something were used in a part of the code of the Tennessee Code that if you had to change that would be there was some issue there, and I don't remember what that was, but that may be something for Maria to look at because my memory is they were linked to something else as well, and that's why we had not gone through the effort of changing that in the past. So just for information.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Rick, and I know we had discussions about this in the past, and when we talked Tuesday, we discussed that a little bit as well, and I think that's why we would like for legal to give us some advice on just what might happen, and you know, what are the ramifications. That's what we're asking for.
Perfect.
Okay, any more questions to the architect committee?
Yeah, Brian, I have one other thing, and we didn't discuss this, but it's probably a good time to bring this up.
Okay.
The NCARB this year has their annual meeting in June, and they have told us that it's probably going to be a hybrid NCARB meeting where they prefer it to be in person. It will be in Los Angeles, California, but they're not going to announce whether that is going to be in person or not in May. And then I guess we need to ask the question is, and they would you know, pay for our attending in person. My question is, have we made any arrangements for that? Is the state even amenable to that? And so, Michael, we probably need to check and see, you know, in the next couple of weeks to see, you know, where we stand on that.
I can speak to that right now, and apologies for missing the architect meeting on Tuesday. I was having a not so great reaction to a COVID vaccination. So, but I understand that Maria stepped in and did a great job, and I'd like to thank her for that. The state currently has loosened the restrictions on in-state travel. They're currently not allowing for any out-of-state travel, and the current executive orders, which we're operating under, expire on April 28th. So I think we'll know more in probably 2 weeks' time on whether or not those EOs will be extended.
Michael, this is Rick. If the state lifts those restrictions and we are allowed to participate, where are we in the sequencing of how we can get the travel approved? I know typically we go through a larger list of travel requests. Could we put this request in now and it's contingent on what happens in a couple of weeks?
That's a good question. As you're aware, I have yet to experience the travel aspect of this job. I think that if we wanted to go ahead and fill out any paperwork that might need to be done and have it ready to go, I would expect that as soon as the moratorium is lifted, that there will be a surge in for applications, I guess, for travel approval. And I would imagine that those would go based on priority in terms of time frame, meaning You know, if it's lifted on April 28th and you've got something coming up in June, I would expect that that date would take precedence over somebody that's asking for approval for something in September. But let me double check on that. I'm writing this down right now so that I don't let it slip, and let me see if what I can find out for you.
Right, and just as additional information, they usually have some requirements for airfare, cost restrictions, and hotel reservations, which are not as big of a deal because you can cancel those within 30 days typically. But there's just some logistical things that if someone chooses to attend, and again, they're giving the members that option if they are not comfortable attending in person, then they will allow them to attend remotely. So that's the reason I'm asking. If we can try to get in the front of the line as quickly as possible, that would be great. And I don't know what the application process has been in the past, other than we approved travel for the various individuals on the board, and then that was processed through the state. So I don't know how you guys did that or do that. So that's why I brought it up. I would hate to miss the bus.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments for the Architectural Committee? If not, then we're through, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, guys. Looks like the interior is next.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. This is Melanie Doss, and hope everyone is doing well. We do not have a formal report as a result of a committee meeting that has been conducted in the last while, but intend to have a report for the June meeting. We've just not been able to coordinate our schedules so a quorum can be achieved at a given time when the meetings have been scheduled. So hopefully we'll get that accomplished between now and June and have a full report in June. Just do want to speak briefly to our status on the definition of interior design. Michael and I had a conversation last Friday with CIDQ, and that's the council that on a national level provides the definition of what interior design is. And much like what the architects are doing, we were looking at their definition and establishing, I guess, the basis of the definition for interior design for the state of Tennessee. And so that is something that I know I have brought that discussion up in the past about where do we stand with the definitions. I hope to be able to have a good definition for review and presented along with the schedule that the architects have proposed by the 1st of July. And is this something, I guess, that Maria, should submit this to Maria for her review as well?
Melanie, I'd be happy to look at that and just add it to the list of, different committees that we have, the definitions for.
Okay. And is there, I know in the past there has been a committee, a definitions committee. Do we know if that is going to become active and we need to submit to that committee, or how do we handle that as far as the definitions committee?
There is a definitions. There is a definitions committee. We have to select a chair, and some of the committee work I have been negligent on, but I'll work on that. Maybe we can talk about it some. But yes, there is a definitions committee, Melanie.
Okay, yes. Okay, very good. And that is the extent of my discussion. Does anyone have any questions?
Melanie, this is Frank. I have one. I believe Alan Heathcote is I know I'm on that committee, and I believe Alan Alton is the other member besides yourself. Is that correct?
That is information that we need to gather from Brian.
Okay, Brian.
The heat's on me. Well, I'll tell you, if you guys don't mind, once we get through all the committee reports, Michael, should we circle back to that at the end, you think, or is this something we need to do offline? Not offline, but how should I deal with that part, Michael?
Well, you can make the committee assignments, and then we could make the announcement. Committee assignments don't need to be voted on; they just need to be agreed to by the person you would like to appoint to that position.
Okay.
So if you had that in mind today, we could bring it up in new business after the committee reports are done. And if people agree, we can go ahead and fill those in now, or we can do it all at once if you'd rather wait.
Well, I tell you, I was looking through the list. Why don't we keep going with the committee reports, especially with landscape added on, and we'll may discuss it at new business. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So that's it for interior engineering.
Thank you, Brian. This is Steve King. The engineering committee has been rather busy for the last few months. We met on March the 16th for about 4 hours. We continue to discuss alternative pathways to licensure as a professional engineer. We're looking at technology, 4-year engineering technology degrees, master's in engineering degrees, foreign degrees, and we also continue to discuss decoupling. We also met yesterday for almost 4 hours. That being our regular meeting, we did some more routine business. We reviewed 2 applications. We discussed the upcoming NCEES Southern Zone meeting, which will happen next week, which is going to be a Zoom meeting, which all of us who want to are able to attend. We have selected Ricky to be our voting member for officer election and any other thing that comes up at that meeting. We also discussed the annual NCEES meeting, which will be held in person August 18th through the 21st in New Orleans. This is a shortened list meeting or attendee meeting. The NCEES is only allowing 2 delegates from each board to attend. We obviously would like to send 2 delegates to that meeting, and I'm not sure whether that requires action of the full board or not, but I'll leave that with you for consideration, staff and Mr. Chairman. And yesterday also, we continued to discuss the same 4 items: technology degrees, master's degree, foreign degrees, and decoupling. We do anticipate that we will be making a recommendation for a Tennessee code change that we have been discussing and reviewing with Maria as we move forward. some of the items will require law change and some items will be rule changes. We continue to work, as you can see, pretty diligently on getting a result for those items. And I think that concludes my report unless any other engineer members have an addition. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any questions, or anybody else in engineering committee want to say anything or add anything?
This is Chris Gwaltney. Can I ask a question at this point?
I think so. Sure.
I'm sorry I wasn't able to be at the engineering committee meeting yesterday, and I haven't watched the video yet, which I hope to do today. But you mentioned that you anticipate making a recommendation on the decoupling and those rule changes as far as pathways. First of all, do you know when that might be coming out? And I guess secondly, how are you communicating that with the organizations, professional organizations?
Thank you for the question, Chris. This is Steve King again. I think our plan is to work with the board office, and we're spending a great deal of time on these issues. We're trying to, we've had meetings with deans across the state particularly about the technology issue. We hope to get to a recommendation that at some point can be shared with others. I don't have a prediction of when that might be. All I can tell you is we've been spending a great deal of time on trying to get there.
Yeah, Steve, this is Michael. If I may dovetail into that, there's no specific timetable for the completion of this, although there will be a legislative process after the fact, which means that, and we're looking into the deadlines for this year. So at some point this year, to be considered in the next legislative cycle, this would need to be finished up. And once we know that date, we'll hopefully have an end in sight. And then after that, once the committee has approved language and the board approves, there'll be a public opinion, public comment process, just like every other rule or statute change.
Michael, this is Maria. I just want to add one thing to that. So the statute change will come first to allow a lot of these changes to actually happen. And that is usually if the administration does pick up the statute change, they choose which ones to submit to the governor every year. So that would be this summer sometime, and then picked up in the legislative session next year. And those aren't available for, public comment in the same way that our rules are, but our rules will provide further detail and elaborate on the statutory changes. So, just timeline-wise, that will be probably after the statutes are enacted next year.
So you commented that you are talking to the deans of schools, but are you not talking to the professional organizations?
A comment about the deans: when we were first asked to consider an alternative licensure process for four-year engineering technology programs as a course of due diligence. We invited deans of schools who had both ETAC accredited degrees and EAC accredited degrees to come before the committee to discuss the differences in their educational curriculum. So that was what I was referring to. It was a matter of background for that discussion. Obviously our committee meetings are open to the public, and anyone who wishes to listen in is certainly welcome.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate the info, and I will try to make it to more of those committee meetings.
You're surely welcome, Chris.
All right, thank you. Any more questions from the engineering committee or comments? Okay, and the adding landscape committee next.
Thank you, Brian. This is Blair Parker. This is regarding Landscape Architecture Committee, of which we did not meet since the last meeting. But we have two items of discussion, I think, that will be upcoming here very soon. Maria Bush, I'm hearing some feedback. Somebody have a question? Nope. Okay, Maria has assembled some language, some suggested language or an amendment to the statute, which basically follows suit on the architectural side. It's TCA 622802, and then also under reciprocity, 622304. These are items I'd like to review with the committee members. And I would really suggest that we meet a week or so in front of next month's, the June 3rd meeting. So if possible, I would like to check with Frank and Robert to see if they can meet either on May the 26th or May the 27th to begin reviewing this information. And we can do that separately, but that's out there on the table. And then we are also working on the full definition for landscape architecture. I still need to get a little more input from ASLA, but I think we're close to it. So, and I'm curious to see what architecture's definition is and engineering's and interiors. So that's where the Landscape Architecture Committee is, and we should have a lot more to report at our next full board meeting. That's it.
All right.
What were your dates, Blair?
May the 26th or 27th.
I'm good in the afternoon of either one of those.
Okay. Frank, if you can just check your schedule sometime, and we can coordinate a meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking at my schedule. I'm good on the morning of the 26th and pretty much any time on the 27th.
Okay, and then Robert, the afternoon of the 27th was good with you?
Yeah.
Michael, can we book that?
Yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it as soon as we're done here.
Great, thank you. Maria, thank you for all your help.
Absolutely, thanks.
Okay, any more questions or any comments for the landscape committee? Okay, I think we're ready for old business. Looks like definitions.
I think we already may have covered that, Mr. Chairman, in some of the committee discussions.
Okay.
But I just want to reiterate, that's as a matter that was requested to me when I first started, that things like definitions be placed on old business so that they're not lost sight of. So Until advised otherwise, I'll just keep putting that there so that it keeps coming back to mind.
Okay, that moves us to new business. Michael, I did send you a couple of quick shots for the committee. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that yet. Maybe while you're reviewing that, is there any other items that need to be brought up for new business?
No, I'm actually looking at it right now, Mr. Chairman, and I think that I think it's okay, so long as those who would be assigned agree to the assignment. Would you like to go ahead and make the announcement?
Sure. So a lot because of Frank's Freudian stop or whatever. But Alton, would you like to be part of the Interior Design Committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would love the opportunity to serve with Melanie in that capacity. Yes, please, and thank you very much.
Okay, I appreciate it. We don't have to vote on or anything, right? This is my deal, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Barrick, I would like to add you to the Nominations Committee and to the Definitions Committee. Still there, Rob?
I'm happy to serve. Now that I'm unmuted, I'm happy to serve as you wish.
All right, thank you. And Blair, would you be willing to operate as the chairman of the Definitions Committee?
Whoa. Yes, I would be. That's a tall order. Yes, I will be.
Yeah. I was going to do Frank, and I just realized I had him chair for all over the place. So I've had to pull it out. Okay. I think that does it. Is there any others, Michael, that
Mr. Tibbs, there is one more on here. I just noticed. We do have one vacancy on the Continuing Education Committee. Current members are Mr. Wagster, Mr. Parker, Ms. Doss, and Mr. King. I'd say you can throw it open to volunteers.
I'd love to do that. Is there any volunteer for that? A bad thing in my company called voluntold that I hate to use the word. So I sure would love it if somebody just would be willing to go into that.
Brian, this is Ricky. I can fill that spot unless somebody else really wants it badly.
I vote for Ricky.
Second the vote.
Thank you so much for volunteering. Thank you so much for volunteering, Ricky.
Okay.
Ricky, it means that, we'll spend more time with you when these committees meet at the annual meeting in October.
Okay.
Okay.
That completes the, I'm giving a real quick once over. That does complete the roster of committee spots.
All right. Well, Michael, any other new business out there?
None from me.
Okay. Anybody else want to bring anything up from the commission?
Brian.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, but I was just gonna say I think I figured out the video. If you guys will allow me to just try one more time.
Let me if you don't mind, Dustin, real
sorry,
quick, because that could be a good ending. Is there anybody else have any other thoughts? I heard one more person. I thought I heard somebody else say something.
Yeah, Brian, this is Ricky. I wanted to get the best idea I could on whether the meetings in June and August would be in person or virtual. And just what the situation is on those.
Let's see, that'd be me. Well, like I said earlier, the current executive orders are calling for virtual meetings. So until those executive orders are lifted, all best I can do is speculate. And I learned a while ago that speculating on something that I don't have control over isn't a very good idea. So until I know more, which will probably be in a couple of weeks, we're going to plan as if they're going to be virtual. But as soon as I know something, you all will know something.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay, anything else?
This is Steve King.
Sure.
Just for information, I don't know where the information comes from, but our city mayor is anticipating that city council meetings are going to be live starting in May. So I assume that information is a result of some communication from the governor. So maybe that'll help you with some planning, Ricky.
Okay, any other comments for new business? All right, Dustin, take us home.
All right, thank you. Yeah, didn't want to just let WebEx win like that, so. Try that, and let's see if this works. Can you all hear that?
I don't. I'm not
No,
sure
I
if
did
anybody
not.
else does.
Oh,
Can't hear it.
No.
Well, I apologize about that, guys. WebEx is just insistent on making this more difficult than you would think, so.
Dustin and Mr. Chairman, before we get off, if you look down in the chat box, bottom right corner, I did place a link to the video, which is on our YouTube channel, so that you all can copy that link and try and use it that way.
Oh. Here. Today, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Tennessee State Board of Examiners for Architects and Engineers. Since the board was founded in Nashville in 1921, the board has carried out their mission to safeguard life, health, and property. As a licensed mechanical engineer by the State Board of Examiners, I know firsthand how the programs and services that they've developed set the standards of practice for professionals across our state. We appreciate your contribution to Tennesseans and congratulate you on 100 years of service.
Okay, so everyone heard that, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin.
Like, huh?
Thank you.
Well done, Dustin. Way to go.
Way to go out on a high note.
Way
Way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, this is Rick Thompson. I have one question.
Okay, yes, sir.
You, all of the cities were notified of this. Was it the city or the newspapers, or how were the local? How was it notified about the 100th anniversary?
Rick, that was taken from our comms team. The department's comms team had put out a press release yesterday afternoon, late afternoon. So each newspaper should have received this press release. I have, while in process of this meeting at the request of Ashley Cates, I've sent an email to the comms team to include the members of the professional societies that come, the administrators, my counterparts for the professional societies that come to our meetings, to have them sent the press release for their newsletter purposes. And then we also used social media, as well as we're going to be using our own website.
Okay, I was just following up. I was going to follow up with somebody at the newspaper if we were, as long as it was submitted. I have something I can tell them I need to talk to them about.
Sure. Yeah, they should have received it
Okay.
yesterday.
Fair, fantastic. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. I believe there was a motion about to be put forth.
I second.
All right. I don't think we have to vote on this one, right?
No, sir.
All right.
All right. We'll see you guys at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.